All right. So we are here with Zaid. Now, Zaid has been a client of mine since last summer, I think is when we
Yeah,
were initially introduced. You are from Toronto. You never really considered the Niagara region other than maybe going to Niagara Falls or going to some of the
I didn't even
parks.
know Welland existed
Perfect.
till I talked to you.
Perfect. Yeah. So I think the first time we met in Welland, you were like, these are some nice homes for like the prices we saw at that point, right? Because
Yeah.
even this, some of this like communities we went to see, it was like surprising because you didn't expect this to exist just like an hour and a half away from Toronto, right? But
Mhm.
yeah, why did you share a little bit? So, uh, how you got started and what your thought process and motivation was to buy this first property out in Welland.
For sure, for sure. I'd be happy to share. So when I started, actually, this all goes back to like graduating from university and starting to like save my money. I've always had these aspirations of eventually achieving some like financial freedom and building wealth for myself. I just wanted to feel like
Mm,
I wasn't just living for the day to day, and I had something at the end of the day or at the end of the year I could see my net worth
yeah,
improve. And you just can't do that with a salary
it's
and
tough. Yeah.
paying rent, right? So I had some very helpful friends tell me about investing in the stock market, and that's how I ended up saving enough that I was able to like consider real estate.
Mm,
And that being said, I was 25 at the time. As a 25-year-old in the Toronto market with like my life savings, you really can't get much. And when you're looking at the properties that you can't afford, which are lower in income, the lowest of the rung, you
mm,
got condos, and then the condo fees just didn't make any sense. So I
mm,
approached it from like let's try to understand like what would the return look like. I tried partnering with a friend to buy a condo, but when you looked at like a negative cash flow of $1,000 a month if you rented it out, it just didn't make sense to split
mm,
between two people.
yeah.
And I was like a lot of people, just kind of SOL, out of options. And I felt like I didn't know what I could do. So I had a friend of mine who has done this before. I was sharing this with him, and he's also one of your clients. So he told me, like, hey, man, Niagara's actually pretty sweet and you could cash flow positive. I was like, wait, what? You can cash flow positive? Like, what is this Niagara? It's like, is it farmland? And so, yeah, so that's when I started initially hearing about the whole BRRRR strategy,
Mm,
converting things into duplexes, having positive cash flows, and really started considering this opportunity. And then, of course, I had no idea what I was talking about. So getting in touch with you was like the first step.
mm.
And that's when I started really getting, well, it was actually that first visit. We saw some properties, some were terrible, some had promise.
I still remember the first one we saw that was already conditionally sold, right? I think the day before
Yeah.
we saw it, someone else had got it under contract. They still let us walk
Hmm.
through it. And we were
Hmm.
like, this is a nice home. If it was available, like we literally, that was the first home you saw. And
Yeah.
you're like, if this was available, we'd be buying this right now.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember that. And the funny part is that we got even luckier when we
Mm.
found the house that we bought, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Because even around the time you were buying in the summer, things were heating up at that point. They weren't quite the craziness that happened later, but it,
Hmm.
it was still heating up, right? Some of the properties were holding offers, some were just selling very quickly. They pop on the market a day or two later,
Yeah.
they're sold. And I still remember your property, they were holding offers, if I remember correctly. But
They only had one other offer.
that's right. It was just us and
Yeah.
one other offer, and we were still able to get a condition, right? We were able to get
Yeah.
conditions accepted, and we actually got quite a nice reduction on the inspection
Yeah.
condition, right? So
Yeah.
it kind of worked out.
For sure. I think before we talk about that, we got to talk about how like when we were first talking, and how when you were first sent, I was like subscribed to the Koken mailing list, and I was reading about these properties, and there were some like really awesome bungalows going for like the low 300,000s, but they were like completely, you needed to gut them
Yeah,
and make a duplex conversion. And
yeah.
how I really wanted to do that because I wanted to unlock that capital, but there was no way I was going to have access to, first of all, a 20% down payment. Second, the
Yeah.
renovation costs. When before you start your in real estate investing career, you don't have access to that kind of money. And I think that's when we started talking about making like an illegal duplex and trying to find a property where we could just do enough
Mm.
where, and so that's where we filtered the criteria to, it has to already have a separate entrance. It has to already have two kitchens. And that was the sweet spot. That's when
Yeah.
we really started finding things that were like, okay, so we're going to put like 30 grand in here. We'll make it an illegal duplex. We'll rent it out for a couple of years, and then we'll figure out how we can make this a legal duplex. And that was probably like the little spark of genius that we've had.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that really helped, right? Because when we go into the numbers, it'll be more clear. But you bought this home
Yeah.
with a 11% down payment, so not
Yes.
quite the 20%.
Mm-hmm.
And the important thing is, if you're buying a property with less than 20% down, it's an insured property. You can't refinance it. To my knowledge, you can't refinance it to pull money out without then going to a 80% loan to value versus the
Correct.
89% that you're starting with. For a property like that, you don't necessarily want to put in a $50,000, $100,000 renovation, because in order to get that money out, you're going to need to build much more value in the property than even that cost of the renovation. So
Yeah.
it's a little bit risky, right? Especially if you don't necessarily have that capital to start with, and if you start borrowing from people to get it done,
Yeah.
and if you're banking on the value going even higher than that amount, it's a bit of a risky proposition. And I
Yeah.
think, yeah, based on our conversation, it really made sense. Okay, we need to get you this first property. We still want it to be positive cash flow. We want it to be a solid investment, but
Yeah.
maybe we can't quite go down the legalizing route just now. So let's still
Yeah.
find you a property that works in the future when you want to legalize it, when you have the capital, once you build equity, you can definitely still do it.
Yeah.
But for now, kind of find a property that we can rent 2 units, get the income, get the cash flow, and have it work for you, right? Start
Yeah.
building you some equity. So,
Exactly. I think the biggest contribution or the biggest thing in our mindset approaching this that helped us do this was just realizing the few opportunities that I had available to myself and realizing that those opportunities are becoming fewer with time. Just in the time that we were talking, I was like seeing the property values go from like 300,000 to 400,000. And I was like recognizing also that I don't have enough money to buy a house in Toronto. So that instead of letting that be a reason for me to stop trying or reason for me to feel like I'm never going to build enough wealth, we just had to find something that could work. Right.
yes.
And that's
Yeah.
when we started knocking on every single door.
Mm.
Before we bought the property in Welland, I wanted to make absolutely sure that this was the most like the best ROI investment. I started looking on the like realtor.ca. I started pulling up cash flow numbers and doing my own like analysis on properties all the way from like Guelph to Oakville, condos. Like I just wanted to make sure that I had the right numbers, the best numbers
Mm.
possible. And that was the case. And even then, there was the admittance that like there was no way I was going to do this alone, and I had to find partners. So talking to my family, they were still in the mindset that like, oh, what is Welland? What is real estate investing? There's so much risk. And
Mm.
really the only person that had my back and was willing to like really help me out because she saw all the research, she came to Welland with me, was
Yep.
my girlfriend and now wife. And that's that we I think because of that mindset, we've been able to come out at the end of it
Mm.
with something that other people don't have and change our circumstances really.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Yeah, having a spouse, a partner who's on the same page, it doesn't seem like a normal criteria to be successful in investing, but it is so valuable,
Happy
right?
wife, happy life, right?
100%, man, 100%. Like even for us, like even though I was investing in real estate before I got married, definitely after I got married, having her help me and just have my back and just even encourage me, like, yeah, if we refinance property, just go out and buy something, like go do it, right? Instead of telling me like, oh, it's too risky, or like, right?
Yeah.
Because same as you, she sees the work I'm doing with my clients. She sees the results we've created, it's like, okay, let's do it some more, right?
Yeah.
Like that
Yeah.
that okay is so valuable, right? Because
Absolutely.
even last year when I purchased sort of the first property that I bought without any partners, right? I was nervous, and it was a funny
Hmm.
feeling because I had done this so many times, but then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I there's no one else that's partnering on this property. So it's like if there's any loss, it's my loss. Any money that needs to be put in, that's like I have to come up with it. So all of a sudden there was a new feeling of like nervousness that I hadn't felt since when I got started, right?
Yeah.
And then having her there saying like, you know what, you've done your due diligence, like go for it, right? It's
Hmm. Hmm.
that little push was it's something that I feel I do it a lot to others, right? To my clients, I'm kind of telling them, hey, it's good, go for it. But I almost needed that myself. So
I remember that because we were talking at that time, and it resonates with me so much because I realized from the entire experience, this is more emotional. This is,
mm,
you have to like, being a real estate investor is the finances and
mm,
figuring out the numbers, but it's not all like that because there's
yeah.
so much unknown, and it's such an emotional journey. I remember after we put in our first offer, I called you and I was like, hey man, do you think this is the right call? And you were there to like help me remember that there are so
Mm.
many examples of success, and that the fundamentals and the calculations that we did make sense, that there was room for error, and that, yeah, like throughout the entire time it was a struggle of like overcoming my own emotions and being able to do the right thing financially.
Honestly, that's it's such a big point that you made because it's so easy to only focus on the numbers without realizing where you are at as an investor, whether you are ready for the project ahead of you. Like it may be a good investment, but is it the good investment for you? Right? Because if I had pushed you to go into like a full duplex conversion that needed like $100,000 reno, and I told you, open up lines of credit with your bank and just go all out to borrow money on second mortgages and whatever just to get it done, maybe you could have done it financially. But when we look at it also from the mental side, the emotional side, like were you ready to take that much stress on the first investment property that you're purchasing? I don't think that would have been a good idea, right? It may like
Yeah.
having too much stress. I've seen it happen where it almost pushes you to make bad decisions, right? You almost want
Yeah.
to quit. You want to just sell midway. You want to just get out of the project versus
Yeah.
sticking it through to see the results that you've kind of seen at this point, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think definitely that conversation of like, how do we get you something that works for you and is also the right property for you at this time? So by finding that property with the second kitchen, the basement bathroom, there were some things we were able to, you still needed to do some work, but it wasn't the full blown renovation. So it kind of fit that sweet spot where it was enough work to get you the positive cash flow, but not too much that it seemed
Yeah.
like this mountain to climb, right?
Yeah, exactly. And stress is plentiful when you're trying to do what we're trying to do.
Mm,
This is especially in the beginning, especially when you're doing the construction before you have it rented out,
yeah,
essentially, and before you have your tenants living in it.
yeah,
There is so much stress. I remember one of the contractors and a good friend of mine came by, and he's talking to me about the calculations and our budget for the construction, and he's like, just remember, this is the lowest it's going to get. It can only go up from here. I guarantee you, your construction budget will never go down.
mm.
And he was right.
Yeah, no, with most of our, at this point, whenever I take on a project, my expectation it'll cost more than what I initially assume, and it'll take longer than what I assume. Like
Always. That's how you know you're not going to get disappointed. You just assume
yeah,
the worst, and
100%.
it could be the best at the end of the day. Like the worst situation is at least it got done.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
no, absolutely, man, absolutely. Yeah, I think just to touch on something you mentioned, it's real estate investing is not a passive investment, but it is probably the most passive active business you can think of, right?
Yeah.
So it's definitely not passive like buying an index fund, buying a stock, just putting your money somewhere and letting it grow for you. So you need to do the work. You need to do your research. You need to go to see properties, put in offers, do inspections, right? Get quotes for contractors, figure out a strategy. There's a lot to do. But
Mhm.
once, like you mentioned, once it's done, once you have tenants living there, paying their rent, now you get to sort of take 6 months, sometimes a year without almost doing anything, right? Where
Yeah.
it's a nice,
Exactly.
peaceful time.
Exactly. Yeah. It was like when we had a very eventful couple of months at the end of last year because we closed on the property. We started painting it that weekend. Like that weekend was like, yeah, these colors need to go. Everything, everything is going to get painted. And we immediately started living in it. And that also kind of helped me feel better about the project that
Mm,
at the end of the day, even though if it takes longer, what we're paying if we're living there is still cheaper than what we'd be paying for
yeah,
rent in Toronto. So that was just like extra peace of mind and also made it easier for us to be able to manage the construction, manage the
yeah.
day to day of the project. So that was also something that I would say contributed to the ability to actually complete this project.
Yeah, it's definitely easier when you're on site more, right? When
Yeah.
you're close by, even definitely the distance is some. It's a challenge that many of my clients go through, right? Buying a property in
Yeah.
Welland, living in like Toronto, Mississauga, Milton, Brampton, right?
Mhm.
It's not easy to be on site often, but I guess there's trade offs, right? They need to be willing to live in Welland, and many people are
No,
not.
I found it very tough to leave Welland,
Really?
actually. I really did. The house that we got, in my opinion, is like beautiful. The
Mm,
upstairs had that like backyard patio. The backyard was amazing. It was
yeah.
really big. And it just felt nice to be like a little bit like more secluded, more connected to nature. I
Mhm.
actually miss the area a lot. And
Really? Yeah.
I, yeah, like I could see the best part about buying this house and renting it out is that I could always move back if I wanted to.
True. You have backup plans now, right? You have different places that if you ever needed to, you could always go back. So that's
Exactly.
awesome.
It's the opportunities that we're affording ourselves right now.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome.